What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel and check out the content. And with this being said, I want to I want to speak on a recent podcast that Jason Whitlock uh he had where he spoke about the performance of Shohei Atani, right, the baseball player. Guy hit what 3 home runs and pitched 6 innings in a playoff game, man, which is historically a great performance, right? Like something that nobody has ever seen that, like at the major league level, somebody do what he did in baseball. And so I didn't I didn't get to watch the game, but people was calling me and telling me about what was going on and what what he was doing and stuff, right? So I was like, man, that's impressive. That's historical, just like everybody else. Like everybody else was saying, people was just, just like was in awe of what the performance that Shohei Ohtani was putting on, as in the baseball game. So Jason Whitlock said that, if and I went to Jason Whitlock's show because he had a thumbnail, and on the thumbnail it was alluding to the point he was trying to say that like black athletes now no longer dominate sports, right? And so I clicked on just to see, what he was going to say. And basically, to me, I just thought it was like his opinion was just like shameless race baiting, right? And so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to play Jason Whitlock's take on what he has to say about race as far as like black people in sports, and then I'm gonna give my input because I just think it was just shameless race baiting, but we'll see. Let's go to what Jason Whitlock had to say about Shohei Ohtani's and this is even the title of it, right? It says Shohei Ohtani proves Black American dominance in sports is ending. And so yeah, I definitely want to address that.
For those of us that are longtime sports fans, like Steve and myself, and someone like you that TJ that participated in sports at a super high level, the man had 10 strikeouts, 6 scoreless innings, and 3 home runs. There's a lot to be appreciative of, and it's a lot to celebrate and recognize. And to me, as an American, I sit here and I'm concerned in terms of like we're losing our dominance in sports and in the most American sports. That is disconcerting to me and signals a larger implication of like, hey man, the point I made of like, man, the American man is being humbled and diminished, and you can see it in the sports world.
Well, Jason, this is something we talk about.
All right, let me before Jason co-hosts even go on, right? American sports have primarily been played by Americans only, right? Like when you look at basketball, for years it was like basketball players up until like the 80s, like I said, with the Dream Team. Like once the Dream Team went over, and as even before the Dream Team went over to the Olympics, and just they wanted the game to be international, right? And so the Dream Team were ambassadors for the game of basketball because it was all about money. The NBA had made or has grown as far as they could grow in the United States, in North America, right? That was it. So in order for the NBA to expand, they had to make the game international. And that's what the Dream Team, part of their mission was for the Dream Team was to go and make the international so they can make that money, show other, they set up camps and everything, and they show other countries and stuff, help develop them as far as basketball. And then now, like 30 years later, you see a whole bunch of international players in the league. So it was about money number one, and it was about creating opportunities for people all around the world to be able to participate. And when it comes to baseball, right? Japan has always had their own league, right? And I never followed their baseball as far as baseball, but Japan has always been, known to have very good baseball players, just like the Dominican Republic and Cubans and stuff like that. And so now they made opportunities for people like Shohei Ohtani to come over and play. It is what it is. Let me see what they say.
Charles Barkley talks about it. I've heard Steve perhaps quote him several times. We talk about black kids all the time, and we're like, how many kids grow up wanting to be lawyers and grow up wanting to be doctors and the rest? Why is it that important that we have Americans dominating sports? Because I actually think it's not that important. Now, do I enjoy it more? Yes, but
I agree. And especially for minorities, right? Because sometimes minorities think that black people, we think that sports and entertainment is our only way out. So if Shohei Ohtani and you have Cubans, like I said, you have Dominican people playing baseball. Like when I first started watching baseball, like in the 70s, it was like a lot of black people playing baseball. Then they, like in the inner cities, like the baseball fields and all that stuff went away, and kids didn't have the opportunity really to play baseball as much because it wasn't promoted as much. They started bringing in the Cuban players, the Dominican players, and stuff like that, right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that if anybody who wants to grow in life, like, it's a long shot that you become a professional baseball player, a professional football, but any professional sport. Like, it's like a 1 in a million chance. And now with it expanding to an international, these sports internationally, it's probably even less than 1 in a million, right? So that causes people to take their focus elsewhere. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't hear anybody, from the black community complaining like, about Major League Baseball. You have guys coming from, like, and you see in the NBA game, at one point in time, they was freezing out like the white, they had phased out a lot of white guys, right? Now, the league phased out white guys and started bringing that. Those were the first people that they phased out of the NBA was white players, right? It was phasing out white players and it was bringing over European players in the NBA. Now, it was a business move. It wasn't like white guys can play basketball too. So, but they wanted to give the NBA a more international appeal. So you had, even before they started coming real heavy with those players from the Europe and stuff like that, you had Drago, then you had Sabonis and stuff like that. So you did have them, but now you have so many international ball players because the world has caught up with the NBA. Most of the and if you look at it, most of the top players in the NBA even now are not black Americans or white Americans. You got Giannis, you got Luka, you have the Joker, you got the kid Schroeder from was it Schrader or Schroeder? The black guy, he's from Germany. So you got then you had Jeremy Lin, so you got people representing the NBA appeals to kids all around the world, and so I don't think is a bad thing.
Overall importance. Is it that important that we have an American dominating the NBA? It'll make it more relevant, right? I like watching Americans better than I like watching somebody from Czechoslovakia or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, is it actually that important? I would actually much rather I want my kids to play sports, to learn the lessons from sports, and then go do something more useful. Right. That is actually what I want for my kids. Right now I have 3. I hope to have 10 or 20. And that is my hope for them. Go do something better and more productive with your life than playing sports. I'm actually, I would have made a lot more money if I would have continued on.
See, and that's the mentality you have to have. Like I said, because to be a professional athlete, you going to, like, it's a long shot. and Jason Whitlock hasn't gotten into it yet, saying that black people are threatened by, these athletes. If you don't make it in sports, then that means you have to put your focus somewhere else. And that type of dedication, like the lessons you learn from playing in sports, that in a discipline, you can apply that somewhere else, and that's what people will do. People will adapt. Just like, white guys didn't complain too much, like when they started bringing over the European players, like I say, because for the NBA, because those were the first players, white players were the first ones affected by the NBA going international. Right. And so this just is like growth of the league, or the league expanding, in my opinion.
But like, is my life far more productive that I didn't have a 10 or 15-year NFL career? Is my mind far more developed? Have I become probably a better man and a better husband and a better father and a better Christian? Yeah, absolutely. So like in the grand scheme of things, we zoom out a little bit. It's probably not that big of a deal. It's probably good if Americans aren't solely focused on being the very best basketball player in the world.
Absolutely.
So TJ, you want to have 10 or 20? What are you gonna do? Live in a shoe? Big Air Jordan? Oh, good grief. Anyway, hey, that's your personal choice. So a couple things come to mind. Boy, that performance has me thinking Shohei must have really bet on himself Friday. But anyway, there is a sociological issue here. The participation of black athletes in baseball the last 30 years has gone down significantly. And I remember Major League Baseball had the RBI initiative years ago, trying to get more participation in these areas and the demographics. I don't even know if that thing exists anymore. I don't see an influx of what is generally considered our best athletic base playing baseball. There used to be a time right when I was growing up, a little bit before, when places like Oakland, California, and Tampa produced a lot of good black ball players. I mean, Hall of Fame level guys. And it was a thing. Now you go into those cities, I guarantee you they're probably playing basketball and football and not much else. And that's their choice. But I think that is one of the factors, Jason, as to why maybe the American dominance in baseball has waned a bit.
All right. And so, like I said, so they made it seem, all right, you don't want it to seem like, all right, that's their choice too. But like I said, they had, when I was a kid, like you had little league baseball teams that people were signing their kids up for. So you had all three sports: baseball, basketball, and football. And all the kids, I played all three sports. Most of the guys I know play all three sports: baseball, basketball, and football. Whatever the season was, that's what we played. Then when you got older, if you were good at basketball, you stuck with basketball. You good at football, very, very rarely. Some kids, not very rarely. Every once in a while, you had a kid who could play. I went to school with a guy who was like a beast at all three sports, right? But that type of athlete, like a Deion Sanders, came along every once in a while. But then they started to bring Cuban kids over and allow them to play baseball. Dominican kids, they had made opportunities for them. And so they didn't keep those fields up in the inner city, like in Oakland, even here in Baltimore, right? The baseball fields kind of just went away, like the grass grew. They wasn't keeping them up and stuff like that. The leagues that they had, they had less and less leagues for the kids to play. It's even the same thing in boxing, right? People used to say, well, how are you the world champion when you don't get to fight everybody in the world? You're just fighting basically people, and now boxing is an international sport. So that just goes to show that, like, the sports, because of the money, the sports now are international, because they want to appeal to not just the American audience, but they want to appeal to the world audience. And the WNBA is going through the same thing, right? The WNBA, in my opinion, has been suppressed when they could have expanded the WNBA back in the 80s, when they expanded the NBA to make it a world, to make it a more of an international appeal in sport. But now they don't have any choice but to expand the WNBA, because other countries will be like, look, we're going to have our professional league. And because of streaming and stuff like that, we can show these games everywhere. And then if you get somebody like a Caitlin Clark, and if she go play, if Caitlin Clark goes to play for like an international team, you know, and play in another league, she'll be somebody like when Steve Young went from Brigham, he went from Brigham Young to the USFL, and you know, because they had money. Herschel Walker did the same thing. So it's all about money. And I agree with the second guy who spoke and said it's not really a bad thing. In the long run, I was so glad. I went to college, but I didn't get to play basketball because I couldn't afford to work and play and focus on at the same time, right? So I just left. But to me, I don't have all that wear and tear on my body. It made me focus on starting my own business and direct my attention. Everything I learned from playing sports, like as far as the discipline and the focus and all that stuff paid off, like in my business, as far as my business career was concerned. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing.
Steve, you've led me something that we're not going to dwell on today. We may circle back to it this week. And we will have to, because what I'm about to say is very provocative and needs to be unpacked deeper than what I want to do today. But Steve, I think Black American dominance in sports is dying right before our eyes, and it will not be recovered. Mm-hmm. And it's the fall of the family. And sports are best played by young boys that were discipled by older men, their fathers. And no one wants to talk about it, but Black dominance of American sports, it's over. And right now everybody's in denial of it, but you just look around.
Black dominance, all right, I agree that like it's important to have a family structure, right? And I think I'm gonna do a live on this. It's important to have a family structure. And when you look at athletes like Michael Jordan, come from a 2-parent household. You look at Magic Johnson, come from a 2-parent household. Like a lot of athletes, like back in the 70s and in the early 80s, they came from 2-parent households. I think that was important. But no matter what household, and you got guys now in the NBA whose father, like Steph Curry, he come from a 2-parent household, right? Let me see. LeBron didn't. Kevin Durant didn't come from a 2-parent household. But I think the thing here is it don't matter if you come from a 2-parent household now, because now the game is international. You have NBA players now who have their sons in the league. Scottie Pippen have his son in the league. Shaquille O'Neal, he was trying to get his son in the league. You got Ron Harper, Ron Artest. I'm not Ron. I think Ron Artest do have a kid. Rajon Rondo, Carmelo Anthony. So it don't matter now because, like I said, the game is international. It's about not like a lack of structure in Black households. It's about the game is international. They don't care, because it's about making money. It's about making money. And the same thing, like when you think about when Jackie Robinson came to Major League Baseball, they didn't bring Jackie Robinson to Major League Baseball out of the kindness of their heart. The Negro Leagues, like you had so many Black men and Black people making money in the Negro Leagues, they wanted that money. You had people filling up stadiums, they selling concessions, popcorn and food. They wanted the Major League Baseball wanted that money. If they had white only money, and Black people, them Negro baseball leagues was selling out. They was making tons of money. That's why a lot of Black people, they didn't merge with the Negro leagues. Major League Baseball did not merge with the Negro leagues. They brought in one. They brought in tokenism and made everybody go with the narrative that Jackie Robinson was special and everything. And he was a very good baseball player, but you had great baseball teams at the Negro League level, and it was about money. And that's what it all comes down to, money. I could go a lot further into this, but I'm gonna do a live this weekend. Hope about this, and yeah, that's my take for right now. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment, and I'll check you out in the next episode. Peace.